Hi, this is Kim with the Bellow Vintage Reloved with a wood bead garland tutorial. I am using Iron Orchid Design molds to create the charms for my wood bead garlands. I'm applying some cornstarch to the mold for easy release of the air-dried clay. Then I'm placing the air-dried clay in the mold to create the charms, and I'm going to run a brayer over the clay and then simply release the clay from the mold, and you have your charms. Once you have your charms made up, you want to place a small hole for your twine. So here I'm using the end of a paintbrush to make a hole at the top of the charm. While the clay is curing, I'm going to go ahead and paint the beads. I have about 1/3 cup of water. Paint my wood beads. I'm using about 15, a spoon, and I have a bamboo stick. More about that later. I'm going to make a paint wash with this paint. This paint is really highly pigmented, so it allows for great color even in a wash. And I'm just going to stir it up, make sure it gets evenly distributed in the water. I ended up using about 4 spoonfuls in that 1/3 cup of water to make the color that I wanted. After you've placed all of your beads in the paint and you've gotten them to the color that you want them, I use this bamboo stick to take the beads out of the paint. This is what has worked best for me to avoid drips and allow the paint to dry evenly on the bead. So I'm going to thread the beads onto the bamboo stick, and then I'm actually going to lay that on a box to allow the paint to dry, and that way I avoid the drips and having to sand the beads when they're dry. So I'm going to place the bamboo stick on a box and just turn the beads so that the paint becomes even, and I'm going to separate the beads so that the paint doesn't clump in between the bead. And then I even am going to get a paintbrush and make sure that the excess is smoothed out. So again, there's no dripping. Once the paint is completely dry, you're ready to add more color. Here I'm using a gold and a white. And I'm using what I call a squishy brush, which is just an old worn out brush, 2 squishy brushes, one for each. And this one I'm going to pounce on the white, and I'll just go ahead and pounce it on. I turn the skewers as I go, so I'll get the bead on all different sides with the white paint. Once the white paint is dry, then you're ready to go to your second color. Here I'm using the gold, and the end of my other squishy brush, just one end, I'm going to lay the paint, the gold paint I'm laying on the bead. And again, I'm just going to twist the skewer as I go and try to get the gold on all the different sides of the beads. While your beads are drying, you can go ahead and paint your charms. Here I'm using a gold wax on the Iron Orchid Design air-dried clay that has completely cured. And I'm just using a paintbrush to apply it. You could also use resin for your charms. That would work great as well. I do love the look of the air-dried clay. I think it gives it just a slight bit more of a handmade look, and I really enjoy that. But resin would work great too. Now we're ready to assemble the bead garland. I think the beads turned out really pretty with the blue, the gold, and the white. So what you're going to need is some tape, scissors. I have my bamboo skewer again, and twine, and a little bit of glue. If you want to reinforce your knots with the glue, you can. I am going to cut about an arm's length of twine for the bead garland. And then at the end of both sides, I'm going to put a small piece of Scotch tape, or you could use painter's tape, and that will help you thread the twine through the beads and the charms. I start at the front of the charm, threading the twine through, and then I'm going to pull it around and come through again, making a loop at the top. And then I'm going to take the other strand, once I have that first loop, and make a second loop. When you have both loops, you're going to go ahead and knot it. Here I'm just doing a simple overlapping knot. There's all kinds of different knots you could do, but I wanted to keep it simple for this tutorial. So I pull the knot toward the back, and I'm going to end up doing 3 passes with the pulling the twine in an overlap knot. Once you've gotten your twine in place with the loops and the knots at the top, you're ready to string your first bead. And I'm going to string both sides of the twine through the first bead. You see I have the tape at the end that makes it easier to pass through. If it sticks, you can push through with the bamboo stick. It's very helpful. And now I'm just going to use an overlap knot here at the top of the bead. And after you're done with your knot, you could use a little drop of glue there at the top. I'm not showing that step, but you could definitely do that. I usually do. Make sure your twine strings are even, and go ahead and strand your beads. With the bead strands in place, I'm going to go ahead and join them together with another overlapping knot and a simple bow, trimming off the edges of the twine. And that's it. The bead garland is done. Thank you so much for watching the bead garland tutorial. I do hope you get a chance to make some. They make really fun gifts or to decorate your own home. If you do, I'd love to see pictures. You can reach out to me at thebellavintage.com, The Bella Vintage Reloved on Facebook or YouTube. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.